Fishing. Now what would life be without fishing? Gamer first, angler second. Am I right, lads? And what would gaming be if we never had those cool fishing mini games? Whether the fishing is a fun side activity, a way to make some extra money, an entire side story with its own unique quest lines, or just plain boring, fishing in games has been a staple for a very long time. But what happens when you take the mini out of the game and make angling for sarcastic fringe heads, obese dragonfish or slippery dicks the main attraction of your video game? Then you get games like Fishing Planet or Ultimate Fishing Simulator, which kind of fall in the same category as hunting simulator games. Games with realistic graphics and an attempt at a realistic feeling simulation, but often somewhat tedious and mundane, even if they are good games. So let's take it one step further still and go from planetary fishing on Earth to intergalactic fishing. A game where you zip across the universe in your boat to fish where none hath fished before, uncover a devious corporate fishing mystery along the way, and stay on the water for so long your wife will be a distant, nagging memory, drowned out by the zip of the casting of your line. Fishing is boring, or at least it can be boring, depending on your mindset. In real life, slinking away after a Sunday morning with nary a bite is definitely a possibility, depending on where, when and how you plan to yoink some sea beasts out of the water. In games, there's no problem usually, since it all depends on the code behind the fishing itself. For intergalactic fishing here, on the surface everything kind of speaks for itself. All fish species have an assortment of stats and traits, and the more you satisfy these variables, the faster and more likely it is you'll get a bite of that specific species. With better boats allowing for more equipment, so you can swap out different lures and rods easier, and with better rods making it easier to see smaller fish bites and keeping the line unbroken when a chonker appears. The gameplay surrounding the fishing itself is quite basic. You throw out your line, wait for a fish to bite, hook them to secure them, and then reel them in. There's extra challenge in having diving or sinking lures, as well as a large fish needing to be tired out first, and being careful that the line doesn't break in the process. The real determiner of your fishing proficiency is the preparation you do before casting the line. Within those fish stats, there's 4 related to your lure, and these lures you can make yourself on the fly. This seems to be the largest factor in quick and easy fishing, but these stats are not absolute. Having a lure being the complete opposite of the fish's preferences still allows for that fish to be caught, albeit at a very slow and unlikely pace. Other fish characteristics include current feeding activity, with moments of high activity being optimal, of course. Then there's the area of the fish, which determines its habitat. This doesn't mean you can only catch fish in that area, however, it's just where they're most common. And lastly, the winding speed lets you know whether the fish prefers a stationary or moving lure and at what speeds. All of this data determines fish behavior and how they interact with your lures. A cool and unique aspect of the game is that every fish is individually simulated. What this means in effect is that they are quite unpredictable at times. There might be spots where there are currently next to no fish, for example, and fish you release back into the water can be caught again. It is therefore theoretically possible to completely overfish a lake, since they don't reproduce, they just swim around. Though according to the developer, this would take quite a lot of fishing to accomplish and is not a realistic scenario. There is no way for you to determine where fish are concentrated, however, which is a little bit odd. I don't mean there needs to be a fish scanner or anything, though that would fit with the sci-fi setting, but rather some small animation guidelines where there might be a lot of fish or something along those lines. I do realize this would kind of take away part of the challenge of the game, of course, but it could be baked in a module which you'd need to buy, perhaps something along those fishing lines. The main reason I'm saying this is of course out of frustration for myself. I might have been simply unlucky or too impatient at times, but there definitely were moments where I wouldn't get a bite for a very long time. Those fish variables I mentioned have a similar problem as well, namely that you don't actually know any of these variables at the start of your angling journey. You need to fish the fish up first to find out what preferences they have as a species. You gain more knowledge by simply reeling them in and catching them, and you can further increase that knowledge by dissecting them, with bigger fish gaining you more knowledge. This makes fishing for new species quite challenging, since you have no idea what they prefer, so it's harder to fish them up to know what they prefer. The fish roaming around and not being confined to a specific area of the lake helps here, as well as fish just being likely to bite depending on your lure, instead of your lure needing to be in a certain range of stats to guarantee a bite. This means that you can catch new species while fishing for another, even if it's just by accident. For the 60 odd lakes in the old network, there's also NPCs around, who are fishing themselves. You can go up to them and ask if they know something about a local fish, and they may or may not help you by sharing some small tidbits, and the same goes for any dock owners if there are any. The main selling point of the game, however, is that there are random lakes to go to as well, which you unlock early on in the main story quest. You can teleport to a random lake, do some scans there to get some basic information and a map, and simply start fishing. The thing here is that you don't even know how many fish species there are in the lake to start with, and there's no NPCs around to ask either. This, of course, results in a lot of trial and error at the start. And even with everything I've said, there are still moments that feel sluggish. Not getting any bites after 5 minutes of trying out different lures and areas doesn't feel very good. That's usually the point when I turn the game off for a while and continue on later. At least the music that plays while you fish around is cool. It's relaxing, fits well with the gameplay and the visuals. Though staring at the status of your lure, looking for a fish bite activity on the green bar, does become uncomfortable after a while. The screen defaulting to a green night vision filter when night falls doesn't help, but thankfully you can change that in the options, as well as the size of the lure bar itself. The visuals, in general, as you might have noticed, are of course quite simple, but this simplicity has its own beauty, especially with some of the randomly generated lakes looking very nice. Going to these random lakes is cool just to explore them, and there's nothing keeping you in a random lake for a set amount of time or a set amount of fish. Though if you haven't saved that specific lake as a bookmark, you'll never be able to come back here, so keep that in mind. The reason to go to these lakes in the first place is to make money. You need money to buy better equipment, as well as better modules and new modules, and there's a ton of different items to choose from, with the most expensive boat I've seen coming in at about 9,000 credits, which is quite a lot. Mapping out the random lakes and the fish therein allows you to sell that data for about 50 to 300 credits apiece, depending on stuff like completion level and how special the data actually is, as well as how much you know about the fish living there. Aside from just power progression in buying new items, there's also side quests for some NPCs you can do, as well as the main story quest to follow as well, of course. These all involve fishing, surprise surprise, but the MSQ throws some more unique stuff your way to keep it interesting. The story itself is actually pretty cool and fun, and a lot of the dialogue with NPCs is written very honestly. It borders on being awkward, but I do find it endearing. The entire game is a solo project, by the way, but it isn't something I usually care about. The main story is fun and straightforward. You're simply trying to find out why the fish in your home lake are dying and uncover some crazy stuff along the way. It's a simple story, but it has some very funny moments and dialogue options, fish puns and other great moments, with the humor being pretty dry for a fishing game. While you unlock the random lakes feature during the MSQ, after completing it, you also unlock an entirely new system, the Intergalactic Fishing Society. This provides you with long-term goals, unique challenges and bonus tasks to raise your fame, which allows you to get the best items in the game at certain levels of fame, and as a way to test your skills and patience as well. It's kind of like a prestige system in a way, and could be described as the end game of Intergalactic Fishing. Intergalactic Fishing does what it says on the tin. It's an RPG game about fishing. It's fun, it's simple, and it's relaxing. And if this piques your interest and the simple visuals don't turn you away immediately, I definitely recommend it, though at full price I do think it's a bit much, so I'd recommend getting it on a like 10% sale or whatever, unless it's something you want to play right now, of course. Thanks for watching, I hope you enjoyed the video, and hopefully I'll see you in the next one.